In Washington, political crises rarely arrive quietly, and they almost never end without leaving a mark. Tonight, inside the Oval Office, U.S. President Donald Trump speaks as the longest government shutdown in American history officially comes to a close. It is a moment layered with political calculation, economic fallout, and unmistakable tension between parties that now govern in two very different worlds. For federal workers, this shutdown was more than a headline. It was missed paychecks, canceled flights, stalled services, and a growing sense of national frustration. For Congress, it became a test of unity, of messaging, and of political endurance. And for President Trump, it was an opportunity, a chance to frame the battle on his terms, to reshape the narrative, and to deliver a pointed message aimed squarely at Democrats. As cameras roll and pens clasp the table, Trump positions himself not only as the dealmaker ending the standoff, but as the guardian of taxpayers, the champion of working Americans, and the architect of a political warning for the months ahead. This documentary breaks down the moment, the language, the strategy, and the deeper struggle behind the speech. This is The Shutdown Ends, inside Trump's message, the politics, and the price of a crisis.
Thank you very much. This is a big day tonight. Very important what has taken place because we've seen how good government can be and how bad government can be. People don't know what they're doing. For the past 43 days, Democrats in Congress shut down the government of the United States in an attempt to extort American taxpayers for hundreds of billions of dollars for illegal aliens and people that came into our country illegally, from gangs, from prisons, from mental institutions. They wanted to pay them $1.5 trillion, which would have really hurt our healthcare businesses and our recipients at levels never seen before. Today, we're sending a clear message that we will never give in to extortion, because that's what it was. They tried to extort, the Democrats tried to extort our country. In just a moment, I'll sign a bill exactly like we asked Democrats to send us all along, many days ago. This cost the country $1.5 trillion, this little excursion that they took us on. Republicans never wanted a shutdown and voted 15 times for a clean continuation of funding. There's never been a time when one or the other party ever didn't sign a continuation. It's just a continuation, not a big deal. It's a continuation, and we'll talk later. Yet the extremists in the other party insisted on creating the longest government shutdown in American history, and they did it purely for political reasons. I want to thank Speaker Mike Johnson, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, as well as House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, Majority Whip Tom Emmer, and numerous other great Republican leaders and congressmen and senators who are here and who frankly spent a long time in Washington getting this thing to go away. I also want to thank the broad coalition of Americans that stood with us in this fight to reopen government, including the Teamsters, the American Federation of Government Employees, the Fraternal Order of Police, AMVETS, the National Small Business Association, the American Farm Bureau, the American Trucking Association. These are all incredible patriots. The Airlines for America, the Allied Pilots Association, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, and many, many others, unions and non-unions. Over the past 7 weeks, the Democrats' shutdown has inflicted massive harm. They caused 20,000 flights to be canceled or delayed. They departed so many times, so late. People were hurt so badly. Nobody's ever seen anything like this one. This was a no-brainer. This was an easy extension. But they didn't want to do it the easy way. They had to do it the hard way. And they look very bad, the Democrats do. They deprived more than 1 million government workers from their paychecks and cut off food stamp benefits for millions and millions more Americans in need. They caused tens of thousands of federal contractors and small businesses to go unpaid, and the total effect of the damage their antics caused will take weeks and probably months to really calculate accurately, including the serious harm that they did to our economy and to people and to families. So I just want to tell the American people you should not forget this. When we come up to midterms and other things, don't forget what they've done to our country. I also want to call for a termination to the filibuster so that this can never happen again. If we had the filibuster terminated, this would never happen again. And don't forget, we have another date coming up in the not too distant future. We can never let this happen again. And we should be able to pass really great legislation. So I say terminate the filibuster because, by the way, the Democrats will do it immediately if they ever assumed office, which hopefully they won't. Today we had the highest stock market price ever in all of the different markets. We set a record. It's the 48th time in the 9 months that I've been in office that we had this record set. So think of that, 48 times we had a record set, but today is the highest of them all. We're going to break new grounds. Nobody would have thought. I have with us not only the great political leaders, but the great business leaders of our country. They're standing right behind me and right really alongside of me. And if we would have told them a year ago that we'd be having stock prices this high, none of them, in fact, I just asked them that question, none of them would have believed it. And that inures to jobs and, very importantly, to 401ks, which have also set a record today, a record high for the people that have 401ks. And also, I want to thank Walmart because they came up with a fantastic study. It was the cost of Thanksgiving coming up and the cost of Thanksgiving from a year ago under Sleepy Joe Biden. And we're 25% lower this year than we were a year ago. And it's a very inclusive report. So I want to thank Walmart. They've done it for many years, but we believe in that, and we believe in that company. I want to also thank the 8 Senate Democrats who finally did the right thing in voting to end this craziness, this madness. But unfortunately, the vast majority of congressional Democrats were happy for millions of Americans to suffer. They really did suffer, too. And the Democrats admitted, they said, well, no, we finally have a point. Even though people have to suffer, we finally have a point, and that didn't work out too well for them.
The end of a shutdown is rarely a moment of unity. More often, it becomes the continuation of the very argument that caused it. As President Trump sits behind the historic Resolute desk, the message he delivers is less a closure of conflict and more an escalation of blame. By framing the event as extortion, Trump adopts a tone of confrontation rather than reconciliation. His portrayal of Democrats as ideologically extreme, willing to harm the economy for political gain, reflects a larger strategy that defined much of Washington during his presidency. Draw sharp ideological contrasts, and do so in language that leaves little room for interpretation. The shutdown itself, lasting 43 days, was indeed the longest in American history. For roughly 800,000 federal workers, it meant uncertainty, lost income, and deep anxiety. For airports, it meant manpower shortages that rippled across the country. Trump's speech emphasizes those impacts, but assigns blame entirely to the opposite party. This approach allows him to position himself as the one stepping in to protect Americans from the consequences others created. Yet the reality was more complex. Negotiations stalled on both sides, driven by competing political incentives. Democrats resisted Trump's demands for border policy changes and spending adjustments, viewing them as excessive. Republicans insisted they were necessary for national security and fiscal responsibility. The deadlock became a test of who the public would pressure first, and which narrative would prevail. In this speech, Trump works meticulously to frame the end of the shutdown as a victory for Republicans and a retreat by Democrats. He cites record stock market highs and surging 401k accounts as evidence of his economic stewardship. These talking points offer viewers a contrast between perceived economic strength and political dysfunction, reinforcing the message that while markets thrive, politics falters, and that he intends to keep the country on track despite the opposition he criticizes. The speech also gestures toward the midterms, revealing one of its central political purposes, to encourage voters to view the shutdown as a deliberate strategy by Democrats, one that harmed the public and weakened trust in government. It is a call to memory, a plea for voters to translate frustration into political momentum. In the end, this segment of Trump's address is not merely commentary on the shutdown, it is the opening volley of the next political battle.
But they really went out and they could appease the fringe benefits of their far-left base, but that didn't work out because now their far-left base is angrier than ever before. We actually elected a mayor of New York City who happens to be a communist. When was that going to happen? Remember, I said all the time during my campaign, we will never be a socialist country, and that's right. We turned out to have a communist in New York City, and if you look at his views, those are the views of a communist, not a socialist. So this is no way to run a country. I hope we can all agree that the government should never be shut down again, end the filibuster, terminate the filibuster.
The language used in moments like these is never accidental. When President Trump characterizes political opponents as communist, he is tapping into one of the most enduring political tools in American history: identity-based fear. From the Cold War to the War on Terror, U.S. political rhetoric has frequently framed conflicts in moral and ideological terms. Trump's speech continues that tradition, using potent labels that evoke images of authoritarianism, state control, and threats to freedom. Whether one agrees or disagrees, the impact is unmistakable. It reshapes political debate into a question not only of policy, but of national identity. Trump's insistence that America will never be a socialist country echoes one of his most repeated campaign themes. In this speech, it acts both as reassurance to supporters and a warning about what he characterizes as the Democratic Party's growing radicalism. In political communication, such framing serves a dual purpose: mobilize your base and define your opponents before they define themselves. The reference to the filibuster and the call to eliminate it underscores the deeper institutional struggle that threads through American politics. The filibuster, a Senate rule allowing prolonged debate to block legislation, has become both a shield and a weapon, depending on who wields it. Trump's argument that Democrats would terminate it immediately if given power speaks to a broader fear among voters, that the rules of democracy might be reshaped in ways that consolidate authority. But this framing also raises an important editorial point. Each party, historically, has used the filibuster when it suits them and condemned it when it stands in their way. The broader issue is less about the existence of the rule and more about the shifting incentives that drive political rhetoric. At moments of high tension, institutional mechanisms become political battlegrounds, not merely procedural tools. This segment of the speech, positioned in the latter half of the announcement, reveals a key strategic choice. Rather than focusing solely on the reopening of government, Trump uses the moment to expand the narrative, shifting from immediate political conflict to a larger ideological struggle. For supporters, it strengthens the perception of him as a defender of traditional American values. For critics, it reflects an escalation of divisive rhetoric. For the country, it highlights how deeply intertwined policy debates have become with identity politics, moral narratives, and existential warnings about the nation's future.
So with my signature, the federal government will now resume normal operations, and my administration and our partners in Congress will continue our work to lower the cost of living, restore public safety, grow our economy, and make America affordable again for all Americans. Again, costs are way down. Energy is way down. Gasoline is at $2.50 a gallon versus $4.70 for the Democrats. And we think we're going to hit pretty close to $2 a gallon. That's like a really massive tax cut. It's the equivalent of that. And speaking of tax cuts, our great, big, beautiful bill is giving everybody in our economy, middle income workers, low income, everybody, the biggest tax cut in the history of our country. And it's no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, and very importantly, no tax on overtime. You work overtime, there's no tax. That's among the things that add up to the biggest tax cut in history. And one other thing, you hear about rich people with deductions. Well, when you buy your car and you borrow money, you're allowed to now deduct the interest on that loan. So you can take that interest deduction and what you can take is that interest payment and deduct it for income tax purposes. That's a tremendous tax cut right there. But it all includes fixing the healthcare system that Democrats broke with the disaster known as Obamacare. Obamacare was a disaster from day one. It's done nothing but go up. And if you remember President Barack Hussein Obama, when he came up with this crazy idea, he said everything's going to be great, rates are going to go down, payments are going to go down, everything's going to go down. It went the exact opposite, with the biggest increase of healthcare in any country. It's a disaster. And I'm calling today for insurance companies not to be paid, but for the money, this massive amount of money, to be paid directly to the people of our country so that they can buy their own health care, which will be far better and far less expensive than the disaster known as Obamacare. And I've had, I think, great support. I've even had Democrat support. So we want the money that would be going to the insurance company, which is hundreds of billions of dollars. You know, their stock prices have gone up by 1,000% in many cases, 1,000% over a short period of time, because our country stupidly pays them so much money with this Obamacare scandal. So I want the money to go directly to you, the people. And you go out and you'll buy your own health insurance and you'll negotiate different plans and you'll get much better insurance, and you will be an entrepreneur for yourself.
Economics, as presented in this speech, carries a dual purpose: reassurance and persuasion. By highlighting market records, falling gas prices, and expanding 401ks, Trump seeks to reframe the national mood, reminding Americans of perceived prosperity amid political turbulence. This messaging strategy aligns with a long tradition in presidential communication. When government institutions appear fragile, presidents often turn to economic numbers as a counterbalance, emphasizing stability, growth, or momentum that stands apart from political conflict. It offers viewers a contrast. Despite the shutdown, the country, he argues, remains strong. But economic storytelling is never just about numbers. It is inherently about perception. The specific details Trump cites, gasoline prices, Thanksgiving costs, tax cuts, are not just metrics, but emotional touchpoints. They target the lived experience of everyday Americans: the cost of commuting, the burden of taxes, the pressure of holiday expenses. In political communication, these relatable markers help translate complex economic conditions into accessible narratives. They influence how voters internalize leadership. At the same time, Trump uses the moment to advance a broader legislative agenda. The proposed tax changes, eliminating taxes on tips, overtime, Social Security income, and interest on car loans, are presented not merely as policy, but as rewards for working Americans. Whether these proposals would be feasible or sustained is a separate conversation. What matters in the context of this speech is the framing: that relief is on the horizon, that government can ease burdens rather than create them. His criticism of Obamacare fits this pattern as well. By describing it as a disaster, he positions his proposed reforms as necessary corrections rather than ideological shifts. The idea of sending insurance subsidies directly to the people reinforces a theme of empowerment, appealing to voters who feel constrained by bureaucracy. In this portion of the speech, Trump uses optimism as a rhetorical anchor. The shutdown may have been harmful, he argues, but the economic trajectory remains positive, and with the right policies, it could be even better. The message is clear: the government may have stumbled, but the nation's financial pulse is strong, and he intends to protect it.
So I'm always willing to work with anyone, including the other party. We'll work on something having to do with health care. We can do a lot better. We can do great. So much money is involved, and we're willing to pay so much money to the people. So we're going to pay a lot of money to the people. They're going to go out and buy their own health care, and we're going to forget this Obamacare madness. So with all of that, I just want to tell you the country has never been in better shape. We went through this short-term disaster with the Democrats because they thought it would be good politically. And it's an honor now to sign this incredible bill and get our country working again. Thank you.
In the closing moments of his address, President Trump reinforces a message of strength. By declaring that the country is in its best shape, he contrasts current economic performance with the political dysfunction that preceded the shutdown. This juxtaposition, strength versus chaos, is central to understanding the emotional tone of the speech. It is a message carefully constructed to reassure, but also to redirect. Ending a shutdown is a logistical matter. Framing its conclusion is a political one. Trump uses the signing ceremony not only to reopen government operations, but to solidify a narrative about what caused the crisis, who resolved it, and what lessons should be carried forward. The applause in the room underscores a symbolic return to normalcy. Cameras flash, pens glide across paper. Government employees prepare to return to work. Yet beneath the ceremony lies a deeper question. What does it mean when political battles disrupt the everyday functioning of government? Shutdowns are costly, economically, socially, and psychologically. They erode public trust, disrupt essential services, and highlight the vulnerabilities within America's political architecture. In this context, Trump's closing message serves a second purpose. It aims to recast the shutdown not as a breakdown, but as a trial from which the nation now emerges stronger. For supporters, this narrative landed. It framed the moment as a victory against political obstruction. For critics, it represented a missed opportunity to acknowledge shared responsibility or lessons learned. But from a newsroom perspective, the significance lies beyond partisanship. It lies in the way political narratives shape public memory. By the time a shutdown ends, the facts of what happened often matter less than the story each side tells about it. Speeches like this one become part of that collective memory, influencing how future political clashes are understood. As Trump signs the bill, the shutdown ends. But the deeper tensions remain. They will re-emerge in future debates, future elections, future policy fights. The message delivered in this moment will echo long after the applause fades. Every major political crisis reveals something about leadership. In this case, the shutdown highlights the complex relationship between power, governance, and responsibility. President Trump positions himself as the solution to a problem created by others. In doing so, he reinforces a leadership style defined by contrast: us versus them, strength versus obstruction, action versus delay. This framing resonates with many voters who see political opposition not as a legitimate counterweight, but as a barrier to national progress. Yet the shutdown's real cost was borne not by politicians, but by ordinary Americans. Federal workers missed paychecks, airports slowed, essential services stalled. The political battle was fought in Washington, but its consequences unfolded across living rooms, workplaces, and kitchen tables nationwide. Leadership, in moments like this, is measured not only by policy outcomes, but by communication, by how leaders acknowledge the burden placed on the public and the path toward preventing future crises. Trump's speech emphasizes future political battles, economic optimism, and ideological warnings, but it also reveals a broader truth. The mechanisms of governance are fragile, and the consequences of political deadlock are deeply human. In the end, the shutdown becomes more than a historical event. It becomes a case study in how political conflict tests institutions, shapes narratives, and challenges the country's ability to function in moments of division. As the government reopens, the question left behind is not only who won the battle, but what the nation learned from it, and whether those lessons will meaningfully shape the next political crossroads. Tonight the signatures are dry, the cameras are packed away, and the longest shutdown in American history has officially ended. But the debate it ignited about leadership, accountability, and the cost of political conflict will continue long into the future. This moment, captured inside the Oval Office, offers more than a snapshot of one political leader's message. It reflects the broader tensions shaping American democracy, the push and pull between parties, the struggle over national identity, and the challenge of governing a deeply polarized nation. As government workers return, as airports resume normal operations, and as Americans reflect on the past 43 days, the speech delivered here will remain part of the public record, a testament to how leaders frame crises, assign blame, and chart the path forward. But the larger question remains for the viewer: what role should political conflict play in shaping national policy? And how should leaders communicate responsibility in moments of national strain? We invite you to share your thoughts below. How do you think history will remember this shutdown and the message delivered on the day it ended? Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis insightful, consider subscribing for more in-depth political documentaries.